Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wealth Conversation podcast with me, Tsitsi Mutiti. I guide high-achieving women on their journey to build lasting wealth so they can prepare for an abundant future in every area of their life. I hope that today's episode will help you to transform your relationship with money so you can make the choices that will enable you to create the opportunities and lasting wealth that you desire. Let's get straight into this week's episode. Hey there, it's good to have you back with us. So I know you've been listening to this podcast every single week and that you've been taking in the wealth of knowledge from all the guests that have been on the podcast so far. But a lot of you have told me that you haven't taken any action, mainly because you're not sure where to start. And I get it, because I've been there before. The good news is that I can definitely help you get clear on the 3 steps that you can take straight away to create the solid foundation that you desire. So head to the show notes and click the link to book a Power Hour session with me. There's definitely never been a better time to become the designer of your financial future. My guest for this episode is Charmaine Dawkins-Alder. Charmaine and I will be discussing her family story around navigating debt and becoming financially literate. Welcome, Charmaine, to the Wealth Conversation podcast.
Well, thank you, Tsitsi, for inviting me.
I'm so glad to have you here. Let's start right at the beginning. Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Charmaine Dawkins-Alder. I am a mother. I'm a wife. I'm now a co-author, and I'm also a business owner. I own a training company called Difference a Day Makes. And my thing is that I love to encourage others and motivate others, particularly women, to be the best versions of themselves.
Love that. So you have co-authored a book in which you shared your experience of dealing with financial difficulty, specifically unmanageable debt. So before we go into your story, could you share a little bit about the book itself?
Okay. During the lockdown, I was looking for things to do. And like most of us, we discovered for Zoom, but it wasn't my favorite platform because I generally don't like seeing myself. I was on camera or in pictures. And so it took a little bit of time and courage. But then I found this women's platform, Evolve Navigating Live platform, on a Saturday morning. Someone had sent me an email and I thought, let me have a look at this. And the first Saturday morning that I joined, I thought, there's something here for me. So I need to rearrange my Saturday so that I can be part of this platform. And so that was the start of my journey towards becoming an author. And I'd always written, but everything, notebooks and bits of paper tucked away in a drawer somewhere, and thinking, one day I'm going to write a novel. That was my thinking about my writing, but never really showing it to anyone, but always having that idea in the background. So with the Navigating Live platform, some mornings there would be over 100 women from across the world on the platform. And then in March of last year, Claudine, who ran the women's ministry, that she said, we're looking for 15 women to be part of an anthology to write a little bit about their stories. And so I thought, great platform to write at last. But then when I realised it was writing about something that had happened in my life, I kind of thought, maybe not. So I kind of put it on the back burner. And the following week, they set, the date was being set and they were going to have a meeting. And I was still thinking about it and thinking, do I want to share something intimate that has happened in my own life or with my family? Now, I went to work on the Monday and was having a conversation with one of the women that I worked with. And she said to me, "You should write a book."
That was a sign.
So that was the sign. So I said, "Okay, Lord, I'll do this." So hence the journey started. And so was it the book? It is an anthology. So it's a collective of women who have written their stories. And I thought I was sharing or bearing my soul about something that happened to us. But there was 28 other courageous women who have shared their stories, and reading their stories just really encouraged me. And so it ended up being 2 volumes. So my story is in the health, grief and loss volume, and there is also another volume, and the title of that has slipped my mind. But if you want to purchase the book, it can be purchased on Amazon, or you can DM me and I can get a copy to you. And so it would come under Navigating Life Anthology.
Wow, so. What a journey to becoming an author, Charmaine.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. You know, it's just so interesting, those things that we do on a daily basis, but keep to ourselves, how when the time is right, everything just clicks and it all comes together. And yes, I have got the Navigating Life, Health, Grief and Loss book. And yeah, the stories in there are so powerful. And it's really, I don't know if this was the aim of the book, but I just felt, you know, these are normal women writing about stuff that some of us have gone through several times over, and just hearing how they've overcome those things is so powerful.
Yeah.
So now, turning to your contribution in the book, how did you find yourself focusing on debt? Because money is just one part of our lives, but you decided to focus on your story around debt and overcoming that. So what made you decide to focus on that particular story, first of all?
I suppose because it was such a traumatic period of our lives, and also with the work that I do, I work with particularly single parents and also families that may have had some intervention, trying to help them to find work. But we also have a holistic approach to that. So, and many of them are going through lots of different things, and debt is something that is quite prevalent. And for myself, I realised that when we were going through this, it was the shame, the loneliness that is attached to being in debt. And so coming the other side of that, as I say, initially, I didn't want to tell the story, but from writing my chapter in the book and other women coming to me and saying, "Oh, I've been through that. I know what you're saying. I'm in that lonely place where debt can take you," because you do put a face on and you do think, I must have done, you know, what are the things that I've done that we're in this place? And quite often there seems to be no way out. And now I think, particularly because of the pandemic, that we're now beginning to have a voice of actually talking about our finances, talking about being in debt and our mental health. And so it's a better place now. And I think that sharing it also gives a face to it, that, you know, yes, I've been through this, but I've also come the other side of it.
Oh, 100%. And the pages that your story takes up in the book, for me, were really powerful. I mean, I went to that story first because it was about money, and also that was the story I wanted to read first. And I could see you going through this, but also it took me back to the time when I was going through that, and I could feel those emotions that you had put down on paper. I remembered myself feeling those as well. The shame, the loneliness, the kind of feeling like after this hour, that's it. Everything's going to change, and it will change for the worst.
I also, because before I wrote it, I said to my family that I've been asked to write a chapter in a book, and this is what I'm going to write about. And they kind of like, yes, it's fine. So having their permission, because yes, it's my story, but it's also all my family's story. And the fact that my husband said yes to me sharing, that was also, I thought, okay, if he said yes, then let's go ahead with this.
That's fantastic. I mean, and that's a good example of breaking that silence around money, shame, and debt, especially. I think debt is one of the biggest areas where people fall silent for fear of being blamed, first of all, and just the shame that sometimes comes with it.
Mm.
How did you find yourself in debt to the extent that you almost lost your home?
Yeah, it was something that happened quite slowly. It wasn't that like suddenly we were in debt. It happened quite slowly. So I was working, my husband was self-employed, and being self-employed, he very trusting, is that I do the work for someone and I'll get paid. But as many of us know, when you're self-employed, that quite often, if you don't really put some permits and some barriers around, your monies, okay, I'm going to do this work, but I need to get paid on this particular date. So he was getting paid ad hoc all over the place. And then at that time, most of the direct debits, etc., were all going out of his account. And so because quite often the money wasn't there to cover the direct debits, etc., so what was happening was that the bank wouldn't pay it, and then we would be charged fees for late payments or it not being paid, etc. And so from there it began to spiral. And so then we had an overdraft. And the overdraft, so as soon as your money went in, most of that was swallowed by the overdraft, and they kept offering us to increase the overdraft. And looking back at that time, there was very little help that was given by the banks or the financial institutes. And then we had a credit card, which initially we were managing quite well, but then that was now being used to do the shopping, to do other things. And then we thought, okay, so we thought, right, okay, they say consolidate all the debts, get a loan. And so you figure it out in your head and you think, yes, we're going to be able to do this. And just one thing goes amiss and it's that spiral until you're in a place where, at that time, we weren't even servicing the debt because we had a period where both of us were out of work. And it was, so what do we do? Where do we go? And the mortgage wasn't being paid. And at that time, we weren't having like real conversations around money. I think we were in that stage of blaming each other, but not saying anything. And so it wasn't getting any better until that point where, we nearly lost everything. And then it came to a point where we were back in work, but servicing the debt. And I think many of us get to a point where we think, oh, at least I'm paying. At least I'm paying, the bills are coming in, everything's coming, but I'm paying. But it's almost that thing of where, on the surface, the water looks quite smooth, but underneath you're paddling like mad, trying to keep everything together and everything above surface. And then it got to a point where the anxiety was taking over. And I thought, I can't do this. I know, was it something will give, and it can't, was it, and I can't let that be me. So we jointly made a decision that we are not going back to where we were before, because as well as servicing the debt, quite often what happens, you think that you're out of debt, or you're servicing the debt, and then you fall back into debt again. And we thought, we cannot afford to fall back into debt. We need to actually get out of debt. And so let's look at the things that we need to do in order to get out of debt.
That's such a powerful story. And actually, you know, the way you tell it, your experience is the way a lot of people experience things. It does sort of sneak up on you, and it's not because you've done it consciously, but there's so many other things that are vying for our attention. And money always tends to be the last thing we focus on, because sometimes you feel like, if I just get that contract, or if I just work extra hours, I can cover it. But as you say, you're covering one hole here, there's a leak somewhere else, and then another one comes up. And then there's just life demands, especially when you've got children. There's extra things that come up. I love the fact that you mentioned the conversation, that part of the reason was not because you weren't having a conversation about your situation with your husband. And it's when those conversations started happening that some of the solutions came about. Now, as you were going through that, what were the things that you were saying to yourself that you wish you had known at that point in time?
That I wish that we had known, or that there was a way out. And it sounds crazy, but it was that thing that at that time that I wish that we actually knew that there was a way out. And it wasn't until much later that we were told about a service, I think Christians Against Poverty. And I called them, and at that time that they were unable to help us, but they pointed us to various other places that may be able to help. And I spoke to Citizen Advice Bureau, and they were able to give us some information and said we needed to do a budget sheet. And so that was a real key thing in our coming out of debt. You know, there's that verse in the Bible that Habakkuk 2, it says, write the vision and make it plain. And for us, that came to life at that point. Because usually when we think of that verse, we're thinking about our aspirations, we're thinking about all the goal settings, etc. But it was also that thing of getting it down on paper. And now when I'm asked, you know, what advice would I give? And I always say, write it down. It's scary. It's scary, but it needs to be down on paper so you can actually see what it is and what you need to tackle. And so for us, that was a real key point. We could see how much because prior to that, we knew we were in debt, but we didn't know the exact amount of debt that we had until it was all written down, just getting it down on paper.
Yeah, it's such an important exercise to do, because I think, well, you can tell me if you thought this, but once you had it down on paper, you could see everything in one place.
Yes.
And you can sort of see how things are interacting. Okay, our income is this, but the expenditure is that, and there's a bit of a mismatch, just to put it simply.
Yeah.
And so when I coach my clients, I've created a spreadsheet, but everything is on one page. So you can literally see it on the screen, on one screen. You don't have to go onto another sheet, because I think that is really, really important, to be able to see everything together. Was there anything else besides knowing that there's a way out that you wish you had known?
we realised, okay, it took us time to get into this, and so it's going to take time to get out the other side. And then also, that helped to alleviate some of the stress that comes with it. So, okay, there is a way out. It may take some time, but if we put things in place, then we will come the other side of this.
I love that, Charmaine. I think that is such an important point that you've made, and something worth remembering, that, it will take time, but time sometimes can move very quickly, and before you know it, you're in that better place that you're aiming for. Now, part of your story is about the importance of financial literacy. And for many people, financial literacy comes after they have overcome something that they feel might be disastrous, or whilst they are working through financial difficulty. Looking back on your story, what do you know now about managing your money that you had wished you had known back then?
Right, so things like with direct debits. Okay, one of the things that I did was that we stopped all the direct debits going out. And I remember at the time thinking, this is crazy, but this is what we need to do, because the charges were being added each time. So we stopped the direct debits. So if I'd realised that before, I think I would have done that earlier, because the charges that we were getting, were just mounting, and it was adding to the debt. So being able to do that, and as I said before, the fact that there is advice out there suitable for you and for your situation, and that thing of having the help to write to your creditors, to know that there's service out there to do that. When we were going through, there wasn't so much of that, or having so it was when we spoke to CAB that they said, right, okay, we can write a letter to your credit. Prior to that, we hadn't realised that we could do that, and so we were at that stage where I didn't want to see the postman. I didn't want to hear the phone ring, because it would be someone who we owed money wanting to know when we were going to make the next payment. So those were things that I think would have been really helpful to have had that prior knowledge of where we could go to get help. The fact that the letters could be stopped, because that just gives you a little bit of breathing space to actually get your head together and think, right, okay, what are we going to do? And that would have helped us from falling further into debt, because we would have probably not taken another one of these loans that's meant to help you consolidate, but you still got to pay it back.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's amazing, because you went through this several years ago, but even now, a lot of people don't realize that you can speak to or write to the creditors, and a plan can be put in place. And it just takes me back to the fact that we need to just be talking more about money, not just within the family, but also to the people we owe money to, or the people who owe us money. It's a two-way street. So that conversation at all levels is very important. Mm-hmm. You mentioned write it down and make it plain, right? A verse from the Bible. How do you believe that your faith helped you during this period of financial difficulty?
It helps us a lot. I'm not sure if our marriage would still be intact without it. And
oh my goodness.
That's honestly, that's honestly, because that thing of, one, I had to forgive myself, and I also had to forgive my husband, and vice versa. And that we were in this together. And so being able to pray, that was really helpful. And also, when we got married, the verse that we had was, "Owe no man, no debt, save love." And we held on to that even going through, we were like, Lord, this is the verse that we got. Oh, no, man, no debt, save love. And here we are going through this turmoil with debt. And there was a point where we were almost out of it, and then we both lost our jobs and we were straight back in, and it was like, Lord, please help us, because we need to get the other side of this, because if this verse is for us, then you really have to bring us through.
I think having those things to hold on to can really take you through some of those dark days, because you talk about, you can share your story now because you've come out the other side, but when you're going through it, it seems like there's no way out. And so where are you now in your money story?
Okay, right. So we are now the other side. We're now debt free. The only thing that we owe is our mortgage. Right, and have some savings. We also have an emergency fund, so 3-month buffer. So if something happens, that we know that we can manage at least for the next 3 months, and possibly a little bit longer. We look at how we spend, and we're in a day now where everything is at tap, 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 and we're not actually spending cash. So having disciplines like checking my account every week. So each week we have a look at our accounts, have a look at what I'm spending, and being honest as well. You have to be honest with yourself. How much has been spent. By doing that weekly check, it also shows if I've overspent, then that I need to pull back. And then there's always, you always think, yeah, things are going really well, and then some emergency happens. So, the fridge breaks down or the car doesn't work. Is it something? And so also put in a little bit aside for that. Coming the other side, it has made us much more aware of money factors, the things that we're doing with our income. And again, that thing, if we can't afford it, then we don't have it, or we save towards it. If it's a holiday, then we're saving for the holiday. We plan towards it, and then we save so that we can have that holiday. So it has made me a little bit risk averse, I must admit. It has made me a little bit risk averse, but I'm working on that, because yes, we do have to take risks, but again, making sure that we have done our due diligence before taking that risk. So yeah. What
sort of risks have you started avoiding since you've come out the other side?
Okay, fine. But we talked about things like investments,
right?
Thinking like, okay, well, there's a risk of losing it as well as gaining. So initially, I was like, no, not going there. But now I'm much more open to actually having a look at things rather than, plainly just say no and shutting things down.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. It's all boils down to the point you made about time. You need that time, and your brain needs time to kind of get over that traumatic experience and understand that you're now definitely in a better place, and the potential of you losing the money if you take this action is far less now than previously, because you are checking very regularly, you are discussing this, you now know so much more. So it's definitely is a time thing. Let me know when you're ready to invest.
I certainly will.
Yeah.
I certainly will.
Yeah.
So I must also say that, particularly for couples, because we have separate accounts, and there are pluses and minuses on both sides for having separate accounts or having joint accounts. I mean, we have one joint like savings account, but on the whole, we tend to operate from separate accounts, and that works really well for us. As I said, because my husband is self-employed, his pay frame works a lot better now, so he knows most of the time when he's actually going to get paid, because we put that in place. So if he's taking a job on, he will let them know when he expects to get paid. But because also that I know that my income, it's a regular income, it's going into the bank at a certain time, so the bills come from my account. He will pay money into my account in order, and quite often, like, the bills have already been paid by the time the money clears from his account into mine. But as I say, it works well for us, because then we know that all the bills are being paid, and we're not thinking, oh gosh, is there going to be that shortfall when it goes into his account? So again, talking with each other, seeing what works best, how can you make the funds that needs to be available, and also looking at are there things that you can do to get a bit of an extra income? Are there things that I can do to bolster our income for now? And we did. My husband took on some extra work. My business actually grew out of that, because I was just doing the odd courses and then thought, right, we need to do something. So that's how I really kind of got my business going, because of our being in debt and knowing that we needed that extra income. Also, what were the things that we were paying out for that we didn't need to pay out for? So, getting rid of subscriptions, etc. Also, with the children, we didn't want them to miss out on things. So we've never been like big spenders in the sense that, we're going to go and buy PS4 or 5, etc. But we always did things like looked for like discount tickets for the cinema. We would make sandwiches and be tourists for a day, because it would just cost the 1 day travel card, or is it just things like that? Where could we save monies, but still also as a family have some fun and build some family memories?
I love all of that, Charmaine. It's really great. And working together as a team, if you're a couple and have got joint expenses is really important. So thank you so much for sharing that. As I said right at the beginning, I absolutely love your story, the way it's written. There's so much emotion. You can actually feel like you're going through it with you. What is the one thing you would like readers to take away from your story?
I'd like them to take away the fact that there's hope. And as I said before, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that you can come through this. And it may take time, but yes, you can come through. Speak to someone. I would say speak to someone. If you're in a relationship, speak to your partner, or there are lots of helplines out there. So speak to someone. Don't feel that you have to go through this on your own.
100%, Charmaine. Now, as you know, I believe that to create true wealth, we must all be clear on what wealth means to us in each area of our life. So in a few words, please, could you tell us what wealth means to you in the following areas of your life: physical well-being, mental, spiritual, social, and financial well-being?
Wow. Right. So it actually, on the whole, it speaks freedom. So it frees you from the anxiety. It's freedom free to be able to think and to begin to put your dreams and your aspirations, bringing them to the forefront, because before it was all clouded by the debt.
Thank you so much for that. Freedom. I absolutely love that. How can anyone who'd like to buy the book or get to talk to you about their story get in touch with you?
Okay, they can get in touch with me via my Instagram page, and they can DM me there, and it is Charmaine4522 on Instagram. Yeah, they'll find me there. And also, and if they, again, same if they want to purchase the book, and they can contact me via my Instagram page, and I will furnish them with a copy of the book. Yeah, and any questions, any queries.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Charmaine.
Okay,
it has been so great having you on the podcast, and to get a chance, at least for me, to get a chance to talk to you about your story, which is a really, really powerful story. So thank you so much for sharing it. And thank you to your family as well for being so open to sharing their story, because it's your family's story, really.
Yes.
And such a powerful story, a story of, it's got so ups and downs, but triumph at the end.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Connect with me at The Wealth Conversation on Facebook and Instagram so we can continue the discussion. Also, if you enjoy tuning into this podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next week, stay focused on becoming the designer of your financial future.